Welcome back to another edition of That Time When. Matt Miller with you in Studio 4. Today, continuing the recap of Talkin Trek, the 2019 miniseries with Lee Sargent. On this one, we're talking Deep Space Nine.
Welcome to a Trekzone conversation. It is time once again to talk Trek with Lee Sargent. Lee, welcome back to the show, buddy.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
Now, we last did this one in May. We ended up talking about Dr. Crusher and that space ghost. that was off the cuff. So let's see how we go today with Deep Space Nine, next week with Voyager, and the week after with Enterprise. And then the week after that, It's Star Trek Las Vegas time. I can't believe that that is finally come around again.
Yeah, it seems like it only seems like a couple of months ago that it was on. So because I mean, all of Star Trek Twitter, of course, turns to Las Vegas. So
it's exactly right. Well, and who knows what we're going to be teased with at this convention with Picard coming up and the next season of Discovery, which we are going to get into here on Talkin Trek. But, you know, last year was the big focus on Deep Space Nine's 25th, which is a nice little segue into today's topic, which is, of course, the second spin-off of the franchise, or the third, depending if you include the animated series in that. And a couple of firsts. We had Avery Brooks, an African-American, as our lead character. We were not on a starship. We were on a space station. It was dark. It was gritty. It was tough on the first viewing for this young Trekkie. How about yourself?
No, I actually embraced Deep Space Nine immediately when it first came out, because Emissary is such a strong pilot episode, and I remember it was just a completely different vibe and feel, which I think any show will get crucified for now. But back then, I was kind of ready. I didn't want a clone of Next Generation or even of original Star Trek. And what they came up with was, it was fresh. It was really, really, and this is weird kind of saying this 25 years later. And I still get those feelings when I watch that first episode. There's some beats of music that will always be ingrained in me as a setting for a new Star Trek and a new place to kind of explore the final frontier and stuff. Deep Space Nine did not give me any drama at all, and the internet wasn't around, so I was not aware of anyone else's drama with it, if there were some.
I think that's the biggest thing right now with Discovery as well, that the darker tone that Discovery took, it's very, very similar to the tone that DS9 took with coming off TNG. And I mean, you don't even have to sort of think about the characters, the plots, or anything like that. All you need to do is put an episode of DS9 on after TNG, and to go from those brightly lit sets of the Enterprise D to the dark greys of the Cardassian station. That right there just hits you in the face immediately that this is a completely different show. And it's something that actually took me a second viewing to fully appreciate all the minutiae that comes into it and the level of detail that writer's room came up with.
I think even with even battling the powers that be, who were all determined that every episode had to be standalone and can be shown out of order and all that type of stuff. I think from the get-go, this show was setting a different way of storytelling in the Star Trek universe. Even from the point of view of introducing in the first episode the fact that Cisco is the emissary of the Bajorans. That was always going to be a storyline that you couldn't just go, okay, well, we'll set that on the shelf now and not deal with it. He was always going to be the emissary, and it was always going to be ongoing.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of, whilst you could, in Next Generation, you certainly had growth of characters. You had Riker's beard from one season to another. So the costumes, they flowed on, but you could pick an episode from any season and kind of watch it without a drama. Whereas Deep Space Nine is like you jump in and you go, all right, because this is the point where Nog's already done this, or this is the point where Rom's, married Lita, stuff like that. Stuff continuously grew on the show, and that was just natural. And I think rather than fighting to include that, which I know they did, but it almost feels from the other side of the point of view that they were fighting for it to not be doing that. And that was such a one-sided fight because it was always going to be like the premise of the show just delivered it automatically. And then when they were actually able to do stuff in the story arc, just wonderful.
And that was the biggest departure, I think, from DS9, from the franchise that it had been. We weren't going to places to find a story. The stories were coming to us, and the same people were coming back to the station. Gul Dukat, Nog, Rom, they weren't coming back to the station, but they were coming back to our cast of the week. The development of the minor characters, dare I say, I think was second to none on television at the time, to the point now where people still want to know what happened. And the guest stars of Deep Space Nine, I think more so than the other franchises, are more prevalent at conventions and are more wanted at conventions, that because we grew with these characters over 7 years.
Well, it 100% makes sense because, I mean, the way that the show was set up, it just lent itself to that. So there was always going to be Morn in the bar, because if you had different people in there all the time.
Morn.
If you had different people in there all the time, it would take away the feeling of the station. And so, it was a matter of you had to have a consistent feel of kind of who was there and who were the players. Otherwise, it didn't feel like they weren't, like with the Enterprise, you go to a different planet every day type of thing. And so different guest stars, different specialists on board, all that type of stuff. Whereas with Deep Space Nine itself was very much, I mean, they talk about the Enterprise being a character. Well, Deep Space Nine, the station, was very much a character in itself. And these characters had to inhabit that. And I think also it was interesting because we even had like a death of a major character towards the end, obviously, that they still had to do something with. You couldn't, it still all had to feel like home. So that place was now the place that Jadzia had died. And so when Ezri came in, there was a huge legacy for that. Whereas in kind of other shows, like Stargate, for instance, there's an episode where Dr. McKay in Stargate Atlantis, he breaks up with his girlfriend, or, in fairly traumatic kind of circumstances. And the very next episode, he's kind of making jokes about hitting on the local women and stuff in the next planet. And it was really, particularly if you binge the show, it's very off-putting because it's like, well, there's your ship in the bottle kind of, every episode's its own universe. And Deep Space Nine didn't have that vibe. Even when they were being forced to do standalone episodes, they were still being subversive in the fact that, they would remember things from the previous episodes.
Well, there we go. That is Lee Sargent and myself talking Deep Space Nine in the audio podcasts from 2019. Don't forget, if you are watching us on YouTube, the card is now available in the top right of the video to beam over and catch the first part of that 3-part talk in full. If you're listening to me as a podcast, well, you can jump onto Trekzone.org, scroll down to that time when Deep Space Nine, and the link will be there to beam right through to our official watch page. Still working out how I'm going to do that on the podcasting as well. I guess you could search for Talkin Trek Deep Space Nine. That'd probably bring it up on your favourite podcasting app. It might even be on your device. Well, on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring the bell to get the latest episodes straight to your inbox. If you're listening to us on podcasting, subscribe to the feed so you can get new episodes downloaded straight away. And find us on Twitter, Trekzone.org, and follow. Also, don't forget that we're on Patreon. As soon as we produce episodes, they are available to our patrons, and membership starts from as little as 50 cents a month. That is 50 cents a month for early access to Trekzone podcasts. Jump over to the Trekzone/Patreon right now.
Keep up to date with Twitter. Catch new podcasts daily on YouTube. Plus, we're beaming to your favorite podcast app 5 days a week. Just search for Trekzone and subscribe.